Stephen Parker was about to close the doors of Savory Haven for the last time. The weight of his debts pressed down on his shoulders, and the dream he had nurtured for years was now disintegrating before his eyes. However, just when hope seemed lost, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, with a small child by her side, was seeking shelter where no one else looked. Something in her eyes caught his attention, a desperation he recognized because it mirrored his own. Without thinking of the consequences, Stephen made a gesture that would change everything, unaware that this simple act of compassion would trigger a series of events he could never have predicted. Flavors of Overcoming. A Story of Rebirth. Stephen Parker surveyed the empty restaurant, the tables neatly aligned as if waiting for customers who would never come again. Savory Haven had been his pride, his achievement, but now it was on the brink of collapse. The relentless entrance of large fast food chains like Quick Burger had devoured his clientele until the foot traffic dwindled to almost nothing. Stacks of bills piled on the counter, red numbers in every report. There was no longer any way to sustain the business. He sighed heavily, grabbing the key to lock the door for the last time. A noise outside caught his attention. A woman in tattered clothes, holding a little girl's hand, was huddled against the wall of the alley next to the restaurant. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Stephen saw the reflection of his own situation. A life crumbling, unsure of what would come next. She tried to look away, but Stephen took a step forward. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. The woman hesitated, pulling her daughter closer, but there was something in her expression that wouldn't let Stephen walk away. "We just have nowhere to go," she replied almost in a whisper. "I didn't want to bother anyone, Stephen looked at the empty restaurant behind him and, in an impulse he didn't understand at the moment, made a decision. "Come in. You can stay here tonight." The woman's eyes widened, and the little girl tightened her grip on her mother's hand. "Here?" she repeated, incredulous. "It's just for one night," Stephen replied, opening the door and stepping aside. He knew this wouldn't solve his problems, but he also knew what it was like to be desperate. "Come on. It's cold out there." They entered, hesitantly, as if at any moment the ground might disappear beneath them. Stephen closed the door behind them, and the silence of the restaurant seemed almost palpable, as if the walls were absorbing the tension and uncertainty that hung in the air. He didn't know what would come next, but at that moment, he had a responsibility that was not just to himself. The woman, whom he would later come to know as Olivia Davis, looked around, visibly unsettled. I can't thank you enough, sir. I don't know how to express my gratitude." Stephen shrugged, trying to push away the discomfort that began to form in his chest. "Don't worry about it. You can sit at one of the tables. I'll see if I can find something to eat." He went to the kitchen, still equipped but almost empty of ingredients. The idea of preparing something seemed almost absurd, given the circumstances. But at the same time, there was something comforting about clinging to the familiar act of cooking. As he searched for what was left, Olivia appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Can I help?" she asked timidly. Stephen looked at her, surprised. "You know how to cook?" "A little," she replied, taking a step forward. There was a quiet determination in her voice that stirred something within Stephen. He stepped aside and let her take the lead. She began to work, moving through the kitchen with a skillfulness Stephen hadn't expected. Her agile hands transformed the scant ingredients into something that exuded a familiar and comforting aroma. Stephen watched in silence, impressed. Olivia's daughter, Emma, watched with curiosity, and for the first time since they entered the restaurant, a shy smile appeared on her face. When they finally sat down to eat, Stephen realized something had changed. What had begun as an impulsive act of kindness was evolving into something more. He looked at Olivia and Emma, and for the first time in weeks, an idea began to take shape in his mind. Perhaps there was a way to save Savory Haven that he hadn't yet considered. The food was simple but delicious, and as they ate, a sense of normalcy began to seep in. Stephen could almost imagine that nothing was wrong, that the restaurant was still filled with satisfied customers, and that he wasn't on the brink of ruin. But reality was always lurking, reminding him that this was only a temporary illusion. Still, there was something about Olivia and Emma's presence that made that moment feel different. It was not just the food, nor the company. It was the idea that perhaps he wasn't as alone as he thought. And that, in itself, was more than he expected to find on that cold and desolate night. The restaurant, which until then seemed a tomb of lost hopes, began to come alive again, as if those two lost souls had brought with them a spark that Stephen thought had been extinguished forever. He didn't know what would come next, but in that moment, he was willing to find out. As the meal came to an end, Stephen could hardly take his eyes off Olivia. There was something about her, a silent strength and undeniable skill, that he hadn't expected to find in a woman who seemed to have lost so much. But there she was, moving around the kitchen as if it were her own, with a grace and confidence that belied the desperate situation she was in. Emma, now more relaxed, watched her mother with admiration, and that didn't go unnoticed by Stephen. The bond between mother and daughter was palpable, a connection that seemed to transcend the space they were in. Stephen, who had spent so much time alone lately, felt a tightening in his chest as he witnessed that unconditional love, so evident in every gesture and glance. When Olivia began to clean up the small mess they had made, Stephen stood up and approached her, feeling the need to speak, to understand more about the woman who, in some way, had brought a new light into his dark world. "You cook really well, Olivia," he said, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the curiosity in his voice. She paused for a moment, a slight smile on her lips. "I used to work in a kitchen, many years ago. Before all this." "Before all this?" Stephen repeated, the unspoken question lingering in his words. Olivia hesitated, clearly weighing how much she should reveal, but there was something in Stephen's expression that made her continue. "My ex-husband, John, he made me give it all up. I was a chef in a small restaurant, nothing grand, but it was what I loved to do. When Emma was born, he insisted that I stop working, that I dedicate myself only to our home. I thought I was doing the right thing, but it cost me dearly." Stephen said nothing, just watched as she struggled to maintain her composure. He knew how hard it was to lose something you loved, and he could see that, for Olivia, the kitchen was more than just a job. It was a part of her, something that defined her. "I'm sorry," he said genuinely. "No one should have to give up what they love." Olivia looked at him, surprised by the empathy in his voice. "I never thought I would have the chance to cook again, not like this." Stephen considered her words carefully before speaking. "What if you had that chance? I mean, a real chance to cook again? To do what you love?" She blinked, confused, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I don't know. That's not possible. I have nothing, Stephen. And you, from what I can see, are struggling to keep this place open." He nodded, aware of the difficulties they both faced. "That's true. I'm at a point where I don't know what more I can do to save this place. But, after seeing what you did with the few ingredients left in the pantry, something occurred to me. Maybe Savory Haven doesn't need to be saved alone. Maybe we can save it together." Olivia stared at him, trying to understand what he was proposing. "Together?" "Yes," he replied, feeling a spark of hope reignite within him. "I can't do this alone, and maybe you can't either. But if we join our forces, maybe we can transform Savory Haven into something different, something new. This restaurant needs something to make it stand out, and maybe Just maybe, you are that difference. She fell silent, absorbing what he had just said. Stephen could see the internal battle she was fighting, doubt and fear competing with the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way back for her. He knew he couldn't force her to accept, but he also knew he had to try. "I know you have a lot to worry about," he said softly. "But if you're willing to try, we can see where it takes us. There are no guarantees, but I'm willing to take a risk if you are." Olivia took a deep breath, looking at Emma's small hand, which was intertwined with hers. She knew it wasn't just about her. It was about her daughter's future, too. The idea of having a chance, of doing something meaningful again, was tempting. But the fear of failing, of risking it all and losing everything, was paralyzing. "I need to think about it," she finally replied, her voice low but firm. "Of course," Stephen said, respecting her need for time. "Think about what I said, and if you decide that you want to try, I'll be here." Olivia nodded, and the conversation reached a natural conclusion. But something had changed between them. A tenuous connection had been established, a thread of hope that could be the beginning of something new. Stephen knew he had planted a seed, and now all that was left was to wait and see if it would grow. In the days that followed, Stephen realized that Olivia and Emma's presence had become more than just a temporary act of charity. They began to settle into the restaurant in a way that felt almost natural, as if they had always been a part of that place. Olivia helped with the cleaning, organized what was left in the kitchen, and even started experimenting with some new recipes using the few ingredients Stephen could afford to buy. Each dish she created brought something new to the restaurant, a flavor, an aroma, a reminder of happier times. Stephen watched, increasingly convinced that he had made the right choice in proposing the partnership. There was something special about the way Olivia worked, a passion he hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. What had started as a gesture of compassion was slowly transforming into a true collaboration. Stephen found himself looking forward to each new day, curious about what Olivia would prepare, what Emma would say or do to brighten the atmosphere. Savory Haven was changing, and Stephen felt, with growing certainty, that this was the beginning of something bigger than he had ever imagined. But as the restaurant came to life, shadows from Olivia's past began to loom closer. On a quiet afternoon, while Stephen was in the kitchen testing a new recipe with Olivia, the restaurant door swung open with a bang. The imposing figure of John Martinez, Olivia's ex-husband, appeared in the doorway, bringing with him a cloud of tension and threat. Olivia froze at the sight of him. Her face drained of color, and Stephen immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. John walked slowly inside with a sinister smile that made Stephen grip the handle of the knife he was holding instinctively. Emma, who had been playing in a corner of the restaurant, ran into her mother's arms, sensing the danger in the air. "Olivia, what a surprise to find you here," John said with a cold and calculating voice. "I was wondering where you had been hiding." Stephen stepped forward, positioning himself between Olivia and John. "Who are you?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. John laughed, but there was no humor in his tone. "I'm John Martinez, and you must be Olivia's new friend. But to be honest, I didn't come here to make friends." Olivia held Emma tightly, her voice trembling as she finally spoke. "John, please, don't do this." John ignored her plea, his eyes fixed on Stephen. "Olivia and I have some unfinished business, and I'd say that includes you now." Stephen didn't back down. "If you have something to say it and get out of here." John stepped closer, and Stephen could smell alcohol on his breath. "I came to offer a deal. Olivia knows what I want, and if she doesn't give it to me, well, I can make your lives a living hell." Olivia took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "John, we've been through this. I have nothing to give you. I just want peace." I didn't come here to discuss, Olivia. I came to take what is rightfully mine, he replied with a threatening look. And if you don't cooperate, I'll make sure everyone knows your secrets. And I can bet that will destroy any chance you have of starting over. The threat hung in the air, suffocating. Stephen realized that John wasn't bluffing. He didn't know what Olivia's secrets were, but he didn't need to know to understand that they were serious enough for her to fear for her safety and Emma's future. Stephen felt anger boiling inside him, but he knew he had to be careful. The last thing he wanted was to put Olivia and Emma in danger. You won't gain anything from this, John, Stephen said in a controlled voice. If you want money, you're wasting your time. We have nothing. John stepped back, as if considering Stephen's words. You're right. It's not money I want, but I'm sure there are other ways to get what I need. Desperate, Olivia stepped forward, keeping Emma protected behind her. John, please, just go away. We don't need to do this. You can go on with your life, and I can go on with mine. I wish it were that simple, John replied, in a tone suggesting he was enjoying the power he held over her. But you owe me, Olivia, and I'm going to take what is mine. The confrontation was about to escalate when suddenly the restaurant door opened again. Michael Carter, the investor Stephen had contacted to try to save Savory Haven, walked in, his expression shifting from surprise to suspicion as he saw John there. What's going on here? Michael asked, looking from Stephen to John. John cast a scrutinizing glance at Michael, realizing he was someone influential. Oh, so your new friend is an investor, Stephen? Interesting. Maybe we can discuss a new deal. Before John could finish, Stephen intervened. Michael, this is John Martinez, Olivia's ex-husband. He's trying to blackmail us. Michael frowned, clearly irritated by the situation. If you're here to cause trouble, I suggest you leave now. John let out a short laugh. This isn't over yet. I'll be back, and next time, I want you to be prepared to give me what I want. With that, he turned on his heel and left the restaurant, leaving a heavy tension in the air. Olivia collapsed into a chair, exhausted and trembling, while Emma clung to her, scared. Michael approached, placing a reassuring hand on Olivia's shoulder. We're going to sort this out. He can't threaten you like this. Stephen, still boiling inside, stepped closer to Olivia. Are you okay? She nodded, but her eyes were filled with tears. I don't know how he found me. I thought I was free of him. He won't hurt you again, Stephen said firmly, though he knew the words sounded hollow in the face of reality. We'll find a way to keep him away for good. Michael, still observing the scene, nodded. Stephen is right. I'll talk to some contacts. We'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Olivia looked at both of them, feeling overwhelmed but also touched by the unexpected support. She knew the nightmare with John was far from over, but for the first time, she felt she wasn't alone in this fight. That night, as Stephen and Olivia cleaned up the remnants of another tumultuous day, he watched her, noticing the tension in her shoulders and the exhaustion in her eyes. He knew the weight she carried was immense, and a helpless rage grew inside him at what John had done. We're going to get through this, Stephen said, breaking the silence. No matter what happens, we'll find a way. Olivia sighed, her voice heavy with fatigue. I just wanted Emma to have a normal life, away from all this. I didn't want her to grow up in fear. Stephen stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. We'll make sure she has that life. Together we'll ensure John can't hurt you anymore. Olivia met his gaze, a small spark of hope shining in her tired eyes. I trust you, Stephen. But this isn't something you should carry alone. I'm not alone, he replied, his voice steady. We're in this together. She nodded slowly, knowing he was right. It was scary, but she could no longer run. What was at stake now was much bigger than any fear she carried. And with Stephen by her side, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she could face this demon from her past and finally find the peace she had been seeking. The atmosphere at Savory Haven had shifted again, but this time there was a silent determination permeating the air. Stephen knew the battle was just beginning, but he was ready to fight, not only for the restaurant but for Olivia and Emma. After all, what began as a simple act of compassion had now become a matter of survival, and he was determined to win. In the days that followed the confrontation with John Martinez, Savory Haven became an emotional and physical battleground. Stephen and Olivia were more determined than ever to rebuild the restaurant, but John's shadow loomed over them like a constant threat. Stephen felt the weight of responsibility growing with each passing day, not just for the survival of the restaurant, but also for the safety of Olivia and Emma. As they worked tirelessly, testing recipes and enhancing the restaurant's atmosphere, Stephen couldn't shake off John's last threat from his mind. He knew they couldn't simply ignore him. John was a dangerous man, and his determination to control Olivia was something Stephen couldn't underestimate. Michael Carter, the investor who had shown interest in Savory Haven, was also becoming increasingly involved. He had become a constant presence, offering not only financial support but also a stabilizing force. He brought his contacts and resources, promising to help protect Olivia from any backlash. Stephen wasn't sure if he could fully trust Michael, but at that moment, any help was welcome. The restaurant was almost ready for its grand reopening. The changes to the menu, created by Olivia, breathed new life into the place, and Stephen felt that Savory Haven could truly stand out, offering something unique and authentic, different from the fast food chains that had threatened its success in the past. However, John's fear was still palpable, a shadow that Stephen couldn't shake off. Everything came to a critical point one testing night when Stephen, Olivia, and Michael decided to conduct a full simulation of the service to ensure everything was perfect for the grand reopening. They had invited some of Michael's friends and acquaintances to be the customers, testing the kitchen flow, service efficiency, and dish quality. The atmosphere in the restaurant was charged with expectation. This was the moment to prove that Savory Haven was back. But then, just when everything seemed to be going well, the restaurant door was pushed open forcefully, and John Martinez walked in once again, this time accompanied by two burly men who clearly weren't there to enjoy a meal. Stephen's heart raced, and he saw Olivia freeze upon realizing her ex-husband's presence. "So, this is how it's going to be?" John said, a cruel smile on his face. "You think you can just ignore what I want? I thought I made it clear last time." Michael immediately stood up, approaching John with an authoritative stance. "John, you've crossed the line. Leave now before things get worse for you." John laughed, but there was no humor in his eyes. "You think you can scare me, Carter? You may have money and connections, but I have something more valuable, control, and I will make sure Olivia knows exactly what it means to challenge me." Stephen felt the anger bubbling inside him, and before he could hold back, he stepped forward. "Enough, John. You're not going to hurt her or Emma. If you think you can intimidate everyone here, you're mistaken." John narrowed his eyes, clearly not expecting such resistance from Stephen. "You're a fool if you think you can stop me. I have ways to make your life a living hell." Stephen knew John was dangerous, but he was determined not to back down. "I won't let you ruin her life again. If you want to fight, then let's fight, but not here. This is my restaurant, and I won't allow you to destroy it too." Olivia, trembling with fear and anger, found the courage to speak. "John, please stop this. You can't keep going like this. What you're doing isn't right." John turned to Olivia, his eyes narrowed and filled with contempt. "You've always been weak, Olivia. That's why you've never achieved anything without me. But that's going to change today." Michael, sensing that the situation was about to spiral out of control, signaled to the security guards who were waiting outside, and they quickly entered the restaurant, ready to intervene. "John, you have a choice now," Michael said coldly. "Leave here peacefully, or you'll be removed by force." John hesitated for a moment, realizing he was at a disadvantage. The two men accompanying him exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable with the presence of Michael's security. Finally, John backed down, but not without leaving one last threat. "This isn't over, Olivia. I'll be back, and next time you'll regret challenging me." With that, he turned on his heel and left the restaurant, his men following closely behind. The relief in Savory Haven was palpable, but there was also a residual tension. Everyone knew John's threat hadn't been completely vanquished. When the door closed behind him, Olivia broke down in tears, her courage finally draining away in the face of the stress of the situation. Stephen and Michael approached to comfort her, but she could barely speak. I don't know what to do," she said between sobs. "He'll never stop. He'll never leave me in peace." Stephen felt a wave of helplessness, but also determination. "We'll find a way to stop him, Olivia. We won't let him destroy what we've built here." Michael nodded, his expression serious. "I'll talk to my lawyers and see what we can do legally. We'll make sure he can't threaten you anymore." Olivia looked at them, her expression a mix of gratitude and fear. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." Stephen held her hand, gently squeezing it. "You're not alone in this. We'll get through this together." That night, after the incident, Stephen stayed at the restaurant longer than usual, reflecting on what had happened. He knew the battle against John was far from over, but he also knew they couldn't allow him to continue haunting their lives. What had started as a simple restaurant was becoming something much deeper, a fight for freedom, safety, and a new beginning for Olivia and Emma. And Stephen was determined to win that fight, no matter the cost. The confrontation with John Martinez marked a definitive turning point for everyone at Savory Haven. The restaurant, which had started to rise again, now carried an even heavier weight. It was not just a workplace or a dream of Stephen's, but also a symbol of resilience and redemption for Olivia and Emma. In the days that followed the incident, Michael Carter kept his promise. He mobilized his contacts, engaged lawyers, and used all the weight of his influence to ensure that John could no longer approach Olivia or interfere in their lives. A restraining order was issued, and the details of the legal process were underway. But that did not erase the fear Olivia still carried in her heart. John had shown how far he was willing to go, and that shadow still lingered over her. However, life had to go on, and the reopening of Savory Haven was rapidly approaching. Stephen and Olivia, with Michael's support, worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was perfect. Each day, the restaurant took shape, reflecting the unity and effort of those who believed in its success. Finally, the day of the grand reopening arrived. Stephen woke up with a mix of nervousness and excitement. He knew how much this day meant not only to him, but to everyone who had invested their hopes and efforts into this new beginning. Olivia had been in the kitchen since early morning, ensuring that every dish was flawless. Emma, who had become a little mascot of the restaurant, ran around bringing smiles and laughter that eased the tension. When the doors of Savory Haven opened, Stephen and Olivia stood side by side, ready to welcome the first customers. The response was immediate. The people invited to the reopening were impressed with the changes. The restaurant's atmosphere was warm and elegant, a combination that reflected the best of Stephen and Olivia. The dishes, each more delicious than the last, carried Olivia's unique signature, a mix of passion and experience that delighted the most discerning palates. The restaurant was full, the tables occupied, and the buzz of animated conversations filled the space, creating a sense of triumph that Stephen had not felt in a long time. He circulated through the dining room, chatting with customers, watching proudly what they had achieved. But while doing so, his eyes often returned to Olivia, who was tirelessly working in the kitchen. She was in her element, leading the team with a calm authority, and Stephen noticed how much she had changed since the day he found her in the alley, desperate and hopeless. There was a new confidence in her eyes, a strength he knew had always been there, but now shone with renewed intensity. As the night progressed, Stephen had a moment to reflect. He remembered how everything had seemed lost not long ago. The debts, the empty restaurant, the overwhelming feeling of failure. But now, seeing Savory Haven vibrant again, with satisfied customers and compliments coming from all directions, he knew he had made the right choice. Michael Carter, who was among the guests, approached Stephen, a smile of approval on his face. "You did it, Stephen. Savory Haven is back, and better than ever." Stephen smiled, feeling a deep gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you and Olivia. This is the result of all our hard work." Michael nodded, glancing toward the kitchen. "Olivia is truly a talented chef, and you have a keen eye for recognizing that. I'm impressed." The night continued, and the success of the reopening was undeniable. But there was still a decision to be made, one that could define the future of Savory Haven. After the last customers left and the restaurant was closed for the night, Stephen, Olivia, and Michael gathered in the office to discuss the expansion proposal that Michael had suggested. "Stephen, Olivia," Michael began, "the success of tonight proves we are on the right track. My offer to expand Savory Haven still stands. We could take this concept throughout the city, maybe even further. What do you think?" Stephen looked at Olivia, who seemed to be weighing the options. She knew that this decision would affect not only the restaurant but also the life that she and Emma were starting to rebuild. There was hesitation in her eyes, but also a gleam of ambition that Stephen recognized. "It's an incredible opportunity," Olivia finally said, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "But I'm also afraid that if we grow too fast, we might lose what makes Savory Haven special. I don't want us to become just another restaurant in a chain." Stephen understood her point of view. Savory Haven had always been unique because of the heart and soul he and Olivia had put into it. But at the same time, he knew this was a rare chance to grow, to do something even bigger than they had already achieved. "I agree with you, Olivia," Stephen replied. "But I believe that if we do this carefully, we can keep the essence of Savory Haven intact. We can grow without losing what makes us special. If we are cautious, this expansion could be the next natural phase for us." Michael smiled, seeing that they were starting to consider the idea. "We can do this in a way that works for everyone. Let's start small, maybe just with one more unit, and see how it goes. We don't need to rush. We can ensure that each new restaurant maintains the same quality and care that you have put into this one." Olivia finally nodded, a soft smile forming on her lips. "I trust you, Stephen. If you think we can do this, I'm willing to try." With the decision made, a new chapter was opening for Savory Haven. The expansion would be a challenge, but Stephen felt that with Olivia and Michael by his side, they were ready to face anything. That night, after everyone had left and the restaurant was silent, Stephen and Olivia sat in the dining area, watching the empty space that had been the backdrop for so many emotions. They knew the journey was far from over, but now there was a renewed sense of purpose. "You made this happen, Stephen," Olivia said, looking at him with gratitude. "I don't know where we would be if you hadn't given me a chance." Stephen shook his head, smiling. "We did this together, Olivia. I couldn't have done any of this without you." They sat in silence for a moment, simply savoring the feeling of victory, knowing they had overcome so many adversities to get to this point. But Stephen knew there was one last surprise ahead, something that would change their lives even more profoundly. As they were preparing to leave, Olivia hesitated, as if gathering the courage to speak. Stephen noticed and turned to her, concerned. "What is it, Olivia?" She looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. I wanted to tell you something I recently discovered." Stephen felt his heart race, uncertain about what she was about to reveal. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, a nervous smile forming on her lips. "I'm pregnant, Stephen. It's yours." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Stephen looked at Olivia, absorbing what she had just said. He felt a wave of emotions, surprise, joy, fear, all at once. But above all, he felt a deep and unwavering love for Olivia and the future they were about to build together. He stepped closer to her, holding her hands with a radiant smile. "Olivia, that's amazing. I don't even know what to say. I'm so happy." She smiled, her eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Me too, Stephen. And I'm ready to start this new chapter with you, with Emma, and now, with our child." Stephen pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling a peace and joy he had never experienced before. They had overcome so many challenges, and now they were about to embark on the greatest adventure of all, building a family together. As they held each other, Stephen knew that no matter the challenges ahead, they were ready to face them together. Savory Haven had been reborn, and so had their lives. And now, with a bright future full of hope ahead, they were ready for whatever the world had to offer. The restaurant, which had been a place of despair and defeat, was now a symbol of renewal, love, and new opportunities. And so, as the lights of Savory Haven dimmed for the last time that night, Stephen and Olivia left the restaurant hand in hand, ready for what tomorrow would bring. We hope you enjoyed this narrative. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more emotional stories that touch the soul. Share your ideas and experiences in the comments. We would love to hear what you think, and thanks and critiques are also welcome. See you in the next exciting video. Until then.